Earlier today, the Haas F1 team have announced that they are going to part ways with their driver Nikita Mazepin and with their title sponsor Uralkali. So they released a statement that reads, Haas F1 team has elected to terminate with immediate effect the title partnership of Uralkali and the driver contract of Nikita Mazepin. As with the rest of the Formula 1 community, the team is shocked and saddened by the invasion of Ukraine and wishes for a swift and peaceful end to the conflict. Now, this is a message that I can get 100% behind, and that is why in this video we are going to explain Haas's options to replace Nikita Mazepin ahead of the 2022 Formula 1 season. Okay, so for me the Haas Formula 1 team has 3 options to replace Nikita Mazepin. So the first and most obvious one is our test and reserve driver Pietro Fittipaldi, but we also have the wildcard entries of Antonio Giovinazzi and of course super sub Nico Hulkenberg. Now from these 3, I think that Pietro Fittipaldi is by far the option that's more likely because he's their test and reserve driver. Günther Steiner already told the world that Pietro Fittipaldi would have the first call to join the team, but nonetheless I think that Haas needs to consider the other 2 options that I've listed. So let's begin by talking about Nico Hulkenberg. I think he's the least likely option to join the team because he has been out of the sport for 2 years now and he doesn't have experience in a Ferrari power unit car. So this is so important because the driver that's going to step in at Haas will only have 1.5 days of testing in order to get used to the car and to the power unit, and I think that the driver in the career stage of Hulkenberg and that hasn't had experience with the Ferrari power unit just isn't the right driver. Now don't get me wrong, I really like Nico Hulkenberg, but I just think that he isn't coming back. The mixture of his age and his lack of experience with the Ferrari power unit means that he probably wouldn't just slot into the team and be fast right away, and that's what Haas needs because they have used all of their 2021 development time into this 2022 car, so they really need a driver that can just jump in and get the car to 100% of its performance, and I just don't think that Hulkenberg would be that driver. And besides that, Hulkenberg is at the end of his career, so he's older than the other 2 options that I've listed here, so he's not going to be a long-term prospect for Haas, and this is why I think that this is not a driver that they are going to choose. Now between Antonio Giovinazzi and Pietro Fittipaldi, the conversation is trickier. Now Pietro has the advantage of having already raced for the team and he knows the team inside out because he has been their test and reserve driver ever since 2019, but he has the disadvantage of not having a lot of Formula 1 experience and not racing in a full-time series since 2019. So being 3 or 4 years without a drive in such a sport as Formula 1 is really a long time, and he's not used anymore to being in a racing environment, and even though he has driven a couple of the Haas cars throughout the years for testing, I just don't think that his experience level is the one that Haas needs, because I think that they need a driver that they can benchmark Mick Schumacher up to, and I just don't think that Pietro Fittipaldi will be that driver. Now, I think that Pietro Fittipaldi is a very good guy and a very good driver, but I just don't think that he can match up to Antonio Giovinazzi when it comes to his abilities. So as I've said, Pietro doesn't have a lot of experience, and even though he knows the team, Antonio already knows the Ferrari power unit and he has much more racing experience behind him. So Antonio Giovinazzi, as you have known, has been racing with the Alfa Romeo racing team for the last 3 years, and even though he has never stood out as a Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, George Russell type talent, he really started putting some solid performances at the end of his career in 2021, and he's still young, so Haas could realistically keep him for 5 or 6 years. And Gio is a driver that we could realistically benchmark Mick Schumacher up to because he has got a lot more racing experience than Mick, so if Mick could beat Giovinazzi week in and week out, we would know that we would have a good driver in Mick Schumacher. But I just think that his racing experience combined with the fact that he already knows the Ferrari power unit week in and week out, and he's used to being in a racing environment, plus the fact that he's on standby already by being the Ferrari test and reserve driver, would make him the perfect choice for Haas. I think that with Alfa Romeo he probably did a few tests on the simulator for the 2022 car and he helped in the development of the car. So he's probably used to the 2022 car from the simulator and he already has a lot of racing experience both with Ferrari, with Alfa Romeo and with the power unit, so I think that Antonio Giovinazzi would be the perfect fit. Now being realistic, I think that it's going to be Pietro Fittipaldi who gets the seat because he's the test and reserve driver. Now I really like seeing teams like Haas giving chances to drivers that otherwise could not race in Formula 1 just for money reasons, but I think that Pietro Fittipaldi is going to do a good job, but just not as good as what Antonio Giovinazzi could. But I expect that Pietro's contract will be announced between Monday and Wednesday before the testing starts, because when they reach testing on Thursday, they really need to have a set in stone driver lineup. So that's who I think should replace Nikita Mazepin at Haas for the 2022 season. Now in the end I think they are going to go with Pietro Fittipaldi, but I think that Antonio Giovinazzi would be the better choice. But let me know in the comments down below who you think should race at Haas and why for the 2022 season, and who you think would be the best choice. But in the meantime, that's been it for this more casual video, and I will be back at the end of next week with my full recap of the Bahrain testing, so you can subscribe if you want to see that. But in the meantime, that's been it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can also check out my latest videos right here. So with that said, that's been it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you later this week. Goodbye!